Good evening. My name is Mark Rubenfire, and I'm proud to be the president of the Jewish Community Center of Metropolitan Detroit. I'm so pleased to join you tonight for this special evening. Before I turn it over to our book fair chairwoman, Brenda Brooke, I want you to know that tonight is the last event of our Patron Appreciation Weekend. This weekend we've been honoring all of our patrons. Each year, the support of our book fair patrons helps make events like this one possible. However, in this very strange year filled with so much uncertainty and new challenges, we are deeply grateful for the generosity of our patrons and their commitment to book fair and the art of Jewish storytelling. So please join our board of directors, JCC staff, and our entire JCC family in extending our heartfelt thanks to our patrons. If you like, you can leave a note of thanks in the comments or reach out to all of the book fair patrons in your life. And while we can't give our patrons the collective round of applause that they deserve, we hope you, our patrons, feel our appreciation for making this virtual book fair a reality this year. With that, I will turn it over to Brenda Brooke.
Thank you, Mark. Hello and welcome everyone to the JCC of Metro Detroit's 69th annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair, the oldest Jewish book fair in the country. It is my pleasure to welcome you on this Sunday evening to hear Barry Sonnenfeld, author of Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother, Memoirs of a Neurotic Filmmaker. The goal of the Detroit Jewish Book Fair is to bring the best in Jewish books and authors from around the world to Metro Detroit. And this year, the rooms we're all sitting in may be different, but that goal remains the same. Book Fair runs through Wednesday, December 9th, and we have an exceptional lineup of events still planned. To see our full event schedule and learn about ways to support Book Fair, hear authors you may have missed, and find our online store where you can find Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother, and plenty of other hand-selected books and gifts, visit our website at culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. This year, in order to provide as much programming to the community as possible, we've made all of our events free of charge. So if you enjoy this event and other events you may have seen, please consider becoming a patron. It's still not too late. And patrons will receive a copy of this book among some other gifts. You can also make a donation. And remember, no gift is too small. You can do this by visiting our website, again, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. We rely on community support to make this annual event possible. So thank you in advance for becoming part of our family. The Book Fair team would like to thank the following people for their support. Our day sponsors, Riva and Robert Rosen, and sponsors Joe Ellen and George Nyman. I also want to personally extend my deepest gratitude to the entire Book Fair committee and staff. This has been a challenging year, as we all know, and their dedication, their creativity, their commitment and hard work have made this an exciting festival. We have a really special event for you this evening, and we want you to be a part of it. So you can ask questions and offer comments in the YouTube comment section or by texting to the number in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Our speakers have a great discussion prepared, and they'll take as many of your questions as they're able to. And while you're here at our YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the reminder bell. And that way you'll never miss any of our exciting events. The focus of tonight's event is Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother, Memoirs of a Neurotic Filmmaker. And we have with us the author of the book, Barry Sonnenfeld, as well as Eddie Rubin, who will moderate the discussion. Film and television director Barry Sonnenfeld's outrageous and hilarious memoir traces his idiosyncratic upbringing in New York City, his breaking into film as a cinematographer with the Coen brothers, and his unexpected career as the director behind such huge film franchises as The Addams Family and Men in Black. This book is a fascinating and hilarious roadmap for anyone who thinks they can't succeed in life because of a rough beginning. Barry is a filmmaker and writer who broke into the film industry as the cinematographer on the Coen brothers' first 3 films, Simple Blood, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing. He was the director of photography on Throw Mama from the Train, Big, When Harry Met Sally, and Misery. Sonnenfeld made his directorial debut with The Addams Family in 1991 and has gone on to direct numerous films. His television credits include Pushing Daisies, for which he won an Emmy, and most recently on Netflix, A Series of Unfortunate Events. Eddie Rubin is a Detroit-based filmmaker who began his career as a sophomore at the University of Michigan, where he launched his own film company. At 21, he produced his first feature film, Art House, starring Greta Gerwig and featuring rock legend Iggy Pop. Eddie has co-produced 2 films with director Kasim Basir and is known for his work on The Farewell and Short History of the Long Road, both released last year. So please join me in warmly welcoming Barry Sonnenfeld and Eddie Rubin.
Hiya.
Hello. Hey, Barry. Great to be doing this with you. And, before we start, I think anyone who has not had a chance to read this book, I hope you really take the opportunity, whether you are into film, television or not. As they said in the beginning, this is about succeeding in a world. And one of my favorite quotes actually appears at the end of this book, where you talk about Will Smith joking that he wanted to take you to a school in the city of Philadelphia. And he wanted to tell the students, if this guy can make it as a successful film director, anyone can make it.
That's true. That's true.
Which is such a great moment. And so this book is spectacular. Obviously, for me, being in the film industry, it was a joy. But everyone's responding to it. And NPR has just put it on its top book list for 2020, correct?
Yeah, I just heard about that. My daughter sent me a text about that. So that's very exciting for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll get into this. I'll be looking at the comments as they come in. We'll jump into some audience questions. But I figured, why not start from the beginning? And wanted to start off with the foreword opens with a quote, "Life is a series of accidents, and only the most optimistic of all possible outcomes would have resulted in me." Obviously referring to yourself. To me, that sets an amazing tone for what this book is going to be and who you are as a person. So why don't you start there and talk a little bit about that quote?
Well, I'm going to back up even further, which is my foreword, which is my philosophy, which is regret the past, fear the present, dread the future. My mother, who was, both my parents were profound narcissists. So I grew up as an only child of Jewish persuasion, very much alone. And my mother had many, many issues. And it taught me that if you embrace pessimism, you'll never lose. My theory is if you get on an airplane, and every time I get on an airplane, I view it, as I say in the book, as a failed. Every time I get off an airplane, I view it as a failed suicide attempt. If you nudge your wife and you say, this plane's going to crash, it's win-win. If the plane is about to crash, you get to turn to your wife and say, I'm a genius. I knew the plane was going to crash. And if it doesn't crash, you survive. So there's no upside in being an optimist. And I think that's one of the things I learned from my mother, which is pessimism is the way to be. And so I guess what I would say is, given sort of growing up in this profoundly lonely home with 2 narcissists, I never thought I would be here tonight having written a book, sort of talking about it, having had the career I had as a cinematographer and then a director and a producer and now a writer. So I guess, what I'm getting at is you can't know what's going to happen. And no matter how bad things start out, if you have a certain, my dad always said, decide what you want to be, and then you'll figure out a way how to make a living at it. And so late in life, I decided I wanted to be a cameraman. And, my parents, although they were very Jewish, never said you need to be a lawyer or a doctor or, a professor. My mother wanted me to be an artist, and my dad said, just figure out what will make you happy. Now, by the way, this is a man who was constantly filing for Chapter 11, so I shouldn't have actually taken his advice about that. But again, here we are today, Eddie, so it worked out.
Absolutely. And as you see in this book, you are harsh on your parents. But at the end, I thought there was such a nice sort of quote that summarized everything, where you said, my parents were good people. They were just bad parents.
Yeah, did I say bad or did I say lousy or horrible? If I said bad, I wasn't being mean enough. You know, I'm mean to them throughout the book because they really were very negligent parents. They let my mother's cousin, who was a child molester, live with us, knowing that he was molesting myself, neighbor children, nephews and nieces. So I'm really mean to them throughout the book because I felt they deserved it. But I do redeem them at the end. And I do say that they were beloved. You know, my dad was a salesman, beloved by everyone in the lighting industry. My mother was everyone's favorite elementary school art teacher. And so I feel I get to be mean to them because at the end I redeem them and say they were good people. They were just horrible parents. This all happens at my father's 90th birthday party, where dozens and dozens of very old people stand in line to make toasts to Sonny Sonnenfeld, so his nickname was Sonny. And I was shocked at all these people that loved Sonny, and I learned things about him I never knew, and that, you know, both my father and my mother helped people change careers, help people come out as gay, help people lend them money, even though we rarely had electricity or phone service. So they were special people. They were just horrible parents.
You know, and what was funny to me is you would go as far in public spaces, like a New York Times article, to say you wanted someone to pay, was it $400,000 to get rid of your mother? And she obviously called you distraught over that.
Well, in Newsweek, Newsweek had a front page review of Men in Black. And in the review, it talks about Sonnenfeld, me, being neurotic. In fact, he was so neurotic, he would say to any crew member, I'll pay you $400,000 to get me fired or kill my mother. So my mother reads this in Newsweek and calls me up and says, do you really wish I were dead? And I said to her, Mom, I promise you, I would never pay anyone $400,000 to kill you. At which point my mother said, thank you so much, Barry. I love you too. So I didn't admit I wanted her dead or alive. I just admitted I wouldn't pay someone $400,000 to kill her. But this is after I had appeared on the David Letterman show and said that until he died, my mother could have been a photo double for Vincent Gardenia. And this is after in the New York Times I was quoted as saying, I wish my mother were dead. So, yeah, I wasn't a great son, but I think that they deserve the treatment I gave them. In fact, after I told my mother I wouldn't pay anyone $400,000 to kill her, and she told me she loved me too, she then went on to say, do me a favor. And I said, what's that, Mom? And she said, the next time you're mean to me, can you be mean to Sonny as well? So Dad got away with, for some reason I was nicer to Dad than Mom. And I regret that. I should have been equally mean to both of them.
As you grew up and got older, you talk a little bit in the book about how you started to realize you were your parents. And as reading the book, it was interesting because there were moments where I was reading your description or stories of yourself. For example, on the set of Big with Penny Marshall, and you went out on a limb and yelled cut, not as the director, but as the cinematographer. And she wants to know what's going on. And you told her a light went out, which was clearly a lie, but a
Right.
good lie. And you often talked in the book about your mother's stories and lies. And so that was a moment where I read, I go, oh, this is a moment where maybe he is being like his parents. Looking back on everything now, how do you come to terms with realizing you are your parents, but you also were so hard on them and were not happy with some of their actions?
Well, the secret is to be self-loathing. And once you're self-loathing, that allows you to accept that you become your parents. And I think that a lot of people become their parents. You know, I vowed I would never be like my mother, who was incredibly overprotective. She said, if I went to sleepaway school, others call it college, she would commit suicide. At the age of 10, this is 1963, I was 10. At the age of 10, I told her I wanted to play the trumpet. She said, no, you have to play the French horn, because in 8 years, when you're 18, if this Vietnam skirmish becomes a war and you're a French horn player, you'll be drafted but be put in the army band instead of the infantry. So 8 years ahead of time, she's already forcing me to become a French horn player to avoid the draft. So my mother was incredibly overprotective. I vowed I wouldn't be. Sweetie, my wife, and I adopt Chloe. And to this day, when Chloe gets on an airplane, let's say she goes from LA to Tokyo, I'm on FlightAware. The entire night she's on that plane watching the progress of that plane. And I'll wake up Sweetie at 4 a.m. and I'll go, the plane just changed altitude from 36,000 feet to 34,000 feet. And is now going 10 miles an hour slower than it was 10 minutes ago. What's that about? And Sweetie has to explain why that happens. But Chloe gets off the plane in Tokyo. I call her right away. So I become my mother. And the only thing I can tell you is becoming self-loathing allows you to accept that. So what we call a self-loathing Jew, which I'm one of those guys.
To this day, now married with a child, my mother still requests, who is watching now, that I call when I'm about to take off and call or text when I land, wherever I'm going for work. I know how that goes. We have a question from the audience. Hollywood is known for being tough on the ego with constant rejection. How did that play into your experience in film, in television, and now in writing this book, a new adventure that you had not done before?
You know, I've been very, very lucky. I really have. You know, I've had failures, I've had successes, I've had bad reviews, I've not gotten jobs I've wanted, but I started out incredibly lucky. You know, when I graduated film school, and I only went to film school because I had nothing better to do. I had no interest in film. I was never someone who grew up liking movies or anything like that. But when I graduated NYU Graduate Film School, I bought a camera, a used 16mm camera. This is before video. Now you wouldn't need to own anything because you can shoot movies on your iPhone. But then you needed, you know, a camera. So I bought a 16mm camera so I could call myself a cameraman without feeling like a dilettante. I was at a Christmas party with only WASPs from Darien, Connecticut, and there was one Jew across the room that looked like Howard Stern, and we sensed each other, and we started to talk, and that was Joel Cohen of the Coen brothers. And Joel said he had just written a script with his brother Ethan called Blood Simple, and they were going to shoot a trailer like it was a finished movie and use that trailer to raise the $750,000 to make the movie. I talk about this in the book, and I said, well, I own a 16mm camera, and Joel said, "You're hired." So that allowed me to shoot their trailer. We became friends. It took a year. We raised $750,000 to make Blood Simple. And the first day that Joel, Ethan, and I had ever been on a movie set, ever in any capacity, Joel was a director, Ethan was a producer, and I was a cinematographer. And I think what that gets to is kind of what Dad told me, which is figure out what you want to do in life, and somehow you'll figure out a way to make a living doing it. So I declared myself a cameraman and became a cameraman. And I always say to people starting in the business, don't work your way up. You want to get into the film business, don't become a PA or a second assistant cameraman, and then a first assistant cameraman, and then a camera operator, and then a DP. Declare yourself a cameraman and start shooting things. If you want to get into the film business, write a script. Because it's the one thing you can own that no one can take away from you. Yeah. And there are famous directors who wrote their first script and said, "No, I'm not going to sell this to you. You want this script? I have to be the director." Joel and Ethan were one of those. There have been others. So I have to say, what makes life easier for me in defeat is having a wife who I love desperately and who loves me, and we've been married for 30 years, and having kids that I love. And as I've gotten older, I've actually gotten more relaxed about failure, and I've become less jealous of people. Mike Nichols used to say about the film business, not only do I have to succeed, but my friends have to fail. And that's almost kind of true in the film business. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten more relaxed about failure. And it's made me a happier person.
I love what you said about the not working your way up. I mean, and for me personally, that's sort of how I started. I went to my screenwriting professor in college, who wrote actually Penny Marshall's directorial film with Danny DeVito, Renaissance Man. And I said to him, "I know you have a script that you've never had produced. I'm going to produce it." And I was a sophomore at the time. He kicked me out of his office, but full circle, senior year, the day after graduation, when I was no longer a student, we got together, and a year and a half later, we ended up making that movie. And it's sort of just that gusto that you need, which I think comes from the neuroticism of what is inherent in us Jews. And so I wanted to ask you that, obviously you touched so much on being neurotic about many different things. How did you feel that hindered your work or helped it out? How did that play into your life?
I think it actually has helped me a great deal because I've been very accessible. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I think that the actors sense my accessibility and actually listen to my advice because they kind of want to help me. When I was doing a series of unfortunate events, I was directing an episode with Alfred Woodard, and Neil Patrick Harris told me the story. He said that Alfred called her one weekend and said, "Does Barry give you advice?" And and Neil said, "Yeah, all the time." And she said, "So do you listen to, his suggestions?" And Neil said, "Yeah." And Alfred said, "Yeah, well, I'm listening to them too, but I don't understand why." And I love that about kind of myself, is that I'm very accessible. I'm very neurotic. I just did this show with a Detroit guy, Keegan-Michael Key and Cecily Strong. And every day I came up to them to direct them, they already were smiling and laughing and would take my direction because it was so guileless. And I would say things to them like, "Well, that was pretty bad. You just want to do one more better," which is not what most actors hear from a director. And it's kind of refreshing. So I think that embracing my neuroses has helped me as a director, because people want to help me all the time.
Yeah. You touched there on collaboration, and that actually goes to a question from the audience. Gail, number one, says, absolutely loved your book. It was delightful, and she misses your Esquire columns. And she wanted to know, and you do talk about this a bit in the book, of some directors are more collaborative and some are no, you're just going to execute this vision. She wants to know in particular, were the Coen brothers willing to collaborate on the movies? And were you a partner, or was it more their vision, or how did they operate with you?
Well, they're brilliant. They write brilliant scripts. They are. I don't want to take any credit. That's not due me. But the 3 movies we did together, Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing, were totally collaborative from a visual point of view. We sat together for weeks at a time. We designed shots together. The whole Raising Arizona sequence where, the camera goes over a car, over a tricycle, up a ladder, through a window into Florence, Arizona's mouth. It was all storyboarded, and we worked together, and I learned a lot from them. They learned a lot from me. I'm a big believer that comedy requires wide-angle lenses, which they embraced. So we came up together that way. But in terms of collaboration, as a director, I always say, I'm going to get all the credit anyway, so hire the best people you can. Hire the best cameraman, production designer, Bo Welsh, who's done many movies with me. Some people are insecure and try to feel like they're in charge by hiring people that aren't as good as them. I want people so much better than me, so they'll make me look good. So I have very strong points of view. I very much am in charge, but I also very much embrace other people's ideas and suggestions. There's a scene in the first Men in Black where Will Smith comes into MIB headquarters, enters the elevator, flashes, the other set of doors open, and he's in this testing room with these great sort of bubble chairs. And it was Bo Welsh's idea to have the elevator designed so it's right attached to that room, so it could be one continuous shot. I got credit for it. It's totally Bo's idea. So the Coens have been very collaborative with me, and I have been very collaborative with other crew members that I work with, and I think that's part of what has made me, at times, a successful director.
You mentioned there the wide-angle lens, and you talk about in the book how the wide-angle lens, 21 millimeters specifically, can be used to guide the audience and give direction. And so I'd love to know, when you moved mediums into writing a book, were there tools you used in writing the book that you wanted to guide the audience? For me, one of the things I noticed is you often referred to your parents by their names, not mom or dad, which to me created a distance personally from the parents and signified something. So talk about how going from a filmmaker and having tools at your disposal like score, lenses to guide the audience, to a book, and were there tools that carried over, and what differed, what was the same?
Well, it's interesting. I grew up thinking I wanted to be a still photographer. And then I realized that movies are much more collaborative. I'd be with many more people. I didn't want to be alone, and still photography might be a much lonelier occupation. And now I come full circle, and after all these decades of collaboration, I'm sitting there writing a book, right? And I found the process so enjoyable because, again, I'm an only child writing about myself. What could be better? I would sit down and write 40 pages a day. In fact, my book was 60% longer than I published. I just arbitrarily took out many, many chapters because I wanted the book short enough, the same way the movies I direct are short. There's only be one only one movie I directed has been more than 90 minutes. The rest are all 90 minutes or less. Get Shorty was the only long one, which was an hour and 40 minutes. But the process was really, really easy. It just flowed out of me. So I enjoyed the process, and I think that in a way I wrote it as if it was shot with a wide-angle lens, which is that it's very accessible. I'm very, I make fun of myself. I don't take myself seriously. I make fun of others as well, but I didn't want to write a book where I took a lot of credit for things. So I really enjoyed the experience, and I tried to make it as accessible as possible. In the same way a wide-angle lens invites you in. Look, I'm looking at you, and my iMac has a wide-angle lens, so I'm 18 inches away from the camera. And look, now I'm suddenly very close. Now I'm much wider. That's what a wide-angle lens does. It has this tremendous energy that lets you do this in a very small space, and that the audience feels they are in the room with the actors. And you look like at Tony Scott and Ridley Scott's movies. They're very beautiful, but they use very, very telephoto lenses. And I swear, I think you feel emotionally distant from the characters, and that the audience subliminally knows they are far away from them. And that's not my personality. This is my personality. So that's the way I wrote the book.
And throughout the book, obviously told with humor, even as you talk about moments with cousin Mike in dealing with the molestation. And humor is such obviously an important part of the Jewish community's life throughout history, from the Catskills and the comedians getting their start there. Talk about comedy and humor in your life and the impact and importance of it.
Well, I grew up looking at the Charles Addams cartoons in the New Yorker magazine. Again, Jews get the New Yorker. They read the cartoons first. My dad used to read entire editions of the New Yorker in our one bathroom, and we used to Mom or I would knock on the door and say, "Sonny, we need the bathroom." And his response was always, "All right, let me finish this article." I mean, literally, the bathroom was the place to read. So for me, my humor has always been embracing a darker, quirkier humor. Almost everything I've done has been either dark, quirky, or world building. Whether it's Men in Black or Pushing Daisies or Addams Family, I love creating worlds. And I think part of that is being an only child. I spent all my time in my room with my dinky toys and corgi cars and dinosaurs from the Museum of Natural History and toy soldiers, and invented worlds. And so I've always had this sort of darker, quirkier attitude about life. And, living with a child molester, I both didn't want to make myself into a victim, but I remember Sweetie read the book early on, and she used to be an editor, and she said, "You need another chapter about Cousin Mike because it sounds too flippant." So near the end, I write about a very serious, specific event that happened one night with Mike, mainly so that the audience didn't think I was sort of okay with it. I mean, talk about darkness. When I approached my dad, who was in his 90s, and asked him why he allowed Cousin Mike to live with us, he had 3 answers. He said, first of all, child molestation didn't have the same stigma back then than it has now. Not a good answer. Second of all, your mother was so upset and depressed about all the affairs I was having that I thought Cousin Mike being around would help cheer her up. And I'm thinking, right, but it didn't cheer me up. And then, of course, the third reason is, and this is where you go tilt, game over, is he said, besides, I never thought he molested you. I only thought he was playing with your penis. And at that point, you just got to go, see you, Dad. Thanks for the visit. So in any case, I think that my life has led to a specific, quirky, dark, yet, look, there are some comedians that all their comedy comes out of pain and neuroses. And then there are others like Robin Williams, Jerry Seinfeld, who did not have traumatic childhood. So there are no right ways to being a comedian or writing a book or becoming a filmmaker. It's all a matter of just sort of having an attitude that you'll succeed doing it. And somehow I ended up, I don't know why. I mean, I could just as easily be at home right now with the decaying body of my mother who's been dead for 30 years, not being able to get out of bed. But again, here I am, and I can't tell you why it turned out the way it did.
Yeah. And I think you talk about the accessibility, and you talked about the dark worlds that you create. And I think one of the things that makes them more accessible is, although you create these dark worlds, if you really look at things, even like the Addams Family, the colors are saturated. Even if it's black or white, it's really black, and they're not pale colors, things like that. And I think those colors you often use in your film are bright, vibrant, saturated, allow people, even for the dark material, to come in. And it's funny, Barry and I, for the audience out there, had a quick conversation this afternoon, and he said, Eddie, I know you're in film, but our audience isn't going to be USC film students, so let's try not to get too fancy. And as I look at the questions coming in, they all want to know about movies.
Okay.
And so the next question, and this one will be interesting to hear, of all of the films, which has been your favorite to work on?
My favorite experience was the 3 years of being the showrunner and director of 40% of the episodes of a series of unfortunate events. I'm most proud about that. In terms of films, I think even though Gene Hackman was profoundly mean to me, my favorite film was Get Shorty. In part, and I write about this a lot in the book, it took us 6 years to get that movie made. I read it as a paperback. I called Danny DeVito to see if he wanted to get involved with me on it because I had shot Throw Mama with him and we became good friends. Year after year, we were rejected by every studio, sometimes twice and 3 times. But we persevered and got that movie made, and I loved that movie very much because it took so long to make. Scott Frank, who now wrote and produced and directed Queen's Gambit, was a writer of that. And I love the experience of making that movie, even though, as I say, Gene Hackman constantly yelled at me. But I've been yelled at by others, so it's not. It's sometimes what actors need to do so that they don't have to yell at another actor.
Yeah.
So.
Along those lines, in your cinematography work, John commented on the incredible Miller's Crossing and the work there, and so many unforgettable shots at the time while you were making that. And I guess in general, as you're making a film, whether as a director or cinematographer, do you know on the day that you're getting something special and that is going to stand the test of time, or do you not see that until later when you're in the editing room?
Well, yes and no. I mean, with Joel and Ethan, forgetting about Blood Simple because we were just novices and it worked out, but we didn't really expect it to become a hit or be at the New York Film Festival. But, Raising Arizona and Miller's Crossing, we both knew we all knew we were making something special. I am most proud of Miller's Crossing of all the movies I ever shot. I loved how beautiful it looked. We shot it in New Orleans. Here's an interesting story. Joel, Ethan, and I get down to New Orleans, and we're staying at a hotel called the Canal Place. And the Canal Place had huge neon letters across the top that said Canal Place. Giant letters. You could see it from miles away. And the first week we were there, and we're going to be in New Orleans for 9 months, there's a hurricane, and the hurricane takes out the letter C. But they don't turn the sign off. So for the next 8 months, Joel and Ethan and I were living at the Anal Place Hotel. And literally, every night I'd say, where do you want to go have dinner? And Ethan would say, oh, let's just go back to the Anal Place. It became where we were living. But I'm very proud of that. It looks beautiful. All the stuff in the woods was really special. I used a different film stock. I used Fuji film for all the stuff in the woods because it has a softer green. The Kodak greens are very poppy and saturated, and I wanted it to be more muted. Although everyone remembers the famous Danny Boy scene where, Albert Finney has his machine gun, and those dailies were so bad that Joel and I would offer Ethan $5 if he could go to dailies so we wouldn't have to, because that sequence is made up of hundreds of shots, but no one shot is that fantastic. There's inserts of bullets, there's inserts of smoke, there's inserts of this. So the dailies of that were not particularly enjoyable to watch. While the dailies on comedies, you immediately know, I've got a great scene here. On Miller's Crossing, because it wasn't exactly a comedy, it looked good, but you didn't know until you put it together if it was going to work or not. But I love the cinematography on that movie, and I'm really proud of it.
I think the Anal Place is a great transition into this
I know where
next
you're going.
topic for me. You talk about in the book, often you would get sick from stress on films and meetings and throw up. The one section of the book, I didn't see you talking about throwing up except from one specific incident out of your control, was when you worked in the porn industry. Talk about that and the impact of your life and what that was like, how your parents responded, and how that came to be.
Well, again, when I got out of graduate film school, I bought this 16 millimeter used camera, and the buddy who I bought it with, so we each split the $5,000, said, hey, I just got us a job shooting 9 feature-length pornos in 9 days, and it's going to pay for more than half of the camera. So we were already in 9 days going to pay off half of the camera. So on the one hand, that was great. On the other hand, I brought a lot of my NYU Film School genius to it, in that I felt the only way you could shoot 9 films in 9 days was to light a set. And we shot every scene in a loft, except for one scene, in a loft on 17th Street right off of 5th Avenue. So we would light, let's say, the bedroom set and shoot every sex scene in all 9 movies that took place in that scene, so that you could light something and then just keep shooting different scenes there. And it all went fine, except for on the last night. I won't go into the story, but I'll tell you, just like film, I think that comedy writing is about specificity. And the more specific you are, the funnier it is. And this one chapter about me shooting 9 porno movies is so specific in how horrible and unerotic filming porn movies are, that you will come away from that chapter probably never able to watch a porn movie again. Because let's just say that the punchline is that on the last day I get covered from head to toe in human fecal matter by accident. So, but buy the book anyway.
It's a fantastic chapter. You also talk a lot about martinis, and one of the audience questions is they would love to know your perfect martini recipe.
Here's the secret to a good martini, in my opinion, and just my opinion. Whenever I go to a restaurant, I never order a martini because there's always a chance they're going to put vermouth in it. It won't be cold enough, whatever. So what I order is I say, I would like a brutally shaken Belvedere poured into a martini glass. So then they say, oh, you want a dry martini? And I say, no, I don't want a dry martini, because dry martini means less vermouth. It doesn't mean no vermouth. So I go, just brutally shaken. And when you say brutally shaken, they know you really want it cold, but they remember the phrase brutally shaken. So my secret is brutally shaken Belvedere and nothing else. Just shake it till there's skating so that there's ice sitting on top. The other secret about going to a steak place is not only do you want to order a brutally shaken martini, brutally shaken Belvedere, it poured into a martini glass, but I also carry a picture from the Sky Mall catalog of exactly the most perfect looking medium rare to medium New York strip I've ever seen. And I carry it, it's laminated, and whenever a waiter at the Palm or wherever says, how would you like that prepared? I'll order a New York strip or whatever. I always take out the card, show them the card, and I wish I had it on me, but I don't. My wallet's in the bedroom. And I say, what does your restaurant call this? I don't give them a line reading. I don't say, cook it like this. I say, what does your restaurant call this? And they go, oh, that's our medium rare plus, or that's our medium rare. And that's how I order it. And it always has worked out, except the night that Sweetie and I got kicked out of a restaurant in Custer, South Dakota by the maitre d' because she felt that we were giving the chef a line reading. It's a long story, but it's a good chapter.
You had a wonderful quote that really stuck with me personally, talking about you often feel that you are the hotel that faced the hotel that faced the ocean. You're never quite there. Was there a moment in your career, in writing and cinematography, directing, where you finally felt you were the oceanfront hotel? And have you stayed there since?
You can't stay there very long. You just can't. And, you know, I remember when Get Shorty was released, I felt that I was on the ocean side of the, I was at a hotel on the ocean side of the street. And I started to read, Sweetie, this great review in the New Yorker magazine of Get Shorty. And Sweetie said, I just got to tell you, if you give validation to the good reviews, you have to give validation to all the reviews, including the bad ones. And the last film or television review I ever read was then. I never read another review. Friends are always ruining it by writing me emails that say things like, I don't care what the New York Times said, I liked your movie, which is a little bit like saying, not only do I have to succeed, but my friends have to fail. Who needs that kind of email, right? But I also will tell you that the publisher of Hachette, the publisher of Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother, sent me some reviews, and I admit I looked at them, and the fact that both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times gave my book great reviews made me feel, I think, more validated than anything I had ever done, except being a parent and being married to Sweetie. I mean, that, because it was a new profession for me, and I loved the experience, and I wanted to succeed, and I feel I did, and I really liked the book. So that made me really happy.
Let's talk a second about that titular moment and why I believe you are so specific of it is not call your mother. That is not the title of the book, which is in general sense that we all experience. But there is a specific moment in your life, Barry Sonnenfeld, call your mother. And for most people, you're used to it at school where the principal comes over the PA system. You happen to be at Madison Square Garden.
That's right.
When that came through with none other than Jimi Hendrix about to take the stage. Why don't you share that story and that impact on your life and obviously made the title of your book?
Well, as we discussed, my mother was overly protective, and she agreed to let me go to the first Peace concert at Madison Square Garden, 19,600 people. I think she let me go because Peter, Paul, and Mary were performing, and she was a big folk song. Don't get her started on the Chad Mitchell Trio or Peter, Paul, and Mary. And she said, you just have to be home by 2. And at 2:20 in the morning, as Jimi Hendrix is warming up, over the PA system comes the announcement, and this sounds too good to believe. Barry Sonnenfeld, call your mother. So, first of all, you stand up. So now you're announcing to the garden that you are Barry Sonnenfeld. And since it is a garden, the chant of Barry, Barry starts in the cheap blue seats, but starts to cascade down. And I, of course, am now crying because I know my father is dead. Because how else can a woman get through to any switchboard person and then go up through the ranks to get to the person who says, yes, I'll make that announcement. Again, this is before cell phones or pagers. So I go to the back, I put the dime in, I'm weeping uncontrollably. I call my mother and I said, who's dead? And she said, I thought you were dead. And I said, but Mom, didn't they tell you the concert was still going on? She said, yes, but they couldn't confirm you were there. So that's the level of neuroses and overprotection that I had growing up, that my mother at 2:20, when I was supposed to be home at 2, and then called the garden and found out the concert was still going on, was still convinced I was dead. And of course, Dad wasn't dead. It was just that Mom was, was overly worried about her only son.
Wow. I guess I should thank my mother for never doing that.
And you have to call your mom whenever you get off a plane. So there's that.
Well, back to another audience question, and this sort of touches on the idea of the success and failures. When you directed Men in Black and Addams Family, did you know that it was going to be a success and that you were going to have, was it planned to have sequels, or were they more one-offs and it was the success that turned them into sequels?
They were both one-offs. In the case of Addams Family, it was a horrible experience. I had been a successful cameraman. I was not looking to become a director. I felt very much in charge of my craft and good at it. I also shot When Harry Met Sally and Misery, and I was a sought-after cameraman. And this famous producer, Scott Rudin, called me up and said, I want you to direct Addams Family. And I said, great, if you can do it, good. I'll become a director. And he got the studio to agree to let me do it. But it was horrible. Scott was very controlling. We went very much over budget. Halfway through, Orion went bankrupt and sold the movie to Paramount. And the day Paramount bought it, the head of Paramount was fired, not because he bought it, but the new person came in, hated the dailies. So the second half of the show, we were working for a studio that hated Addams Family. The day I finished shooting, a director gets 10 weeks without the studio being able to interfere. It's called the director's cut. It's a requirement, a union requirement. And the two creative heads at the studio in charge of my movie took me to lunch and said, give up your 10-week cut. And this is in the book, show us the cut. Don't wait the 10 weeks. And I said, look, guys, I'm not going to do that. I get 10 weeks. I've got to get it in good shape for you. And they said, if you won't show us the movie, will you at least tell us what it's like? And I don't know why I did this, but I'm perverse that way. I said, well, I really shouldn't tell you this, but it's like a much sadder version of Sophie's Choice. And I left and went back to my office, and Scott Rudin calls me and says, did you just tell the two heads of the studio on our show that Addams Family is a sadder version of Sophie's Choice? And I said, no, I had told them that it was a much sadder version of Sophie's Choice. So he said, did you tell them it was a sadder version of Sophie's Choice? And I said, no. And he said, well, what did you tell them? And I said, I told them it was a much sadder version. He said, they believe you. I said, Scott, they've seen the dailies. They do this for a living. How could they believe I could turn that movie into a sadder version of Sophie's Choice? He said, they're scared. Just call them and tell them it's better. So I had to call, his name was Gary. I had to call Gary up and say, listen, remember when I told you it was a much sadder version of Sophie's Choice? Yes, I do, Barry. Gary, it was like a joke. Well, then what's it really like? I said, it's actually quite funny. And he went, really? Oh, that's fantastic. So is he equally willing to believe either it's very funny or it's a sadder version of Sophie's Choice? But we had no idea that we were going to have a successful film. And same with Men in Black. It took us years to make that movie. I quit. I went off and did Get Shorty because I finally got that financing. I came back on. The producers wanted Chris O'Donnell and Clint Eastwood. I wanted Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith. So there were issues there. Eventually, I won out. And that chemistry of Will and Tommy is just fantastic. And they loved each other. Tommy hated me, but he loved Will. Because I'll tell you why. Because all comedies need a straight man and a funny person. Mm-hmm. You need Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. You need George Burns and Gracie Allen. You don't want Gracie Allen and Jerry Lewis. That would not be a good movie. So the whole time we were shooting, Tommy kept trying to be funny. And I knew that Will was going to be the funny one, but Tommy was going to be the straight man. But the straight man always gets a big laugh because the straight man is the audience's point of view. You cut to Billy Crystal doing nothing, listening to Meg Ryan fake an orgasm. Billy Crystal gets a bigger laugh than Meg. So there I am for 20 weeks trying to make Tommy not be funny. And he hated me. And his agent called me and said, you only want Will to be funny. And I said, Tommy is funnier than Will. I promise you. Tommy, for 20 weeks, I couldn't look at him. He was so mean to me and so angry. And then Tommy saw the movie and saw that he is as funny as Will. And in every interview that Tommy gave, they said, how did you get to be so funny? And he said, the secret of being funny is to stand next to Will Smith and do whatever Barry Sonnenfeld tells you to do. And after that, the second one, the third one, we were best friends, and he was fantastic. So
you talked about that too on the, I think it was the table read of Get Shorty with what's his name, who did not think he was funny, but all of the lines
Hackman.
And people, yes, Gene Hackman with his lines.
Gene Hackman, we had a table read to see if we wanted to make the movie because Danny wasn't sure anymore. It was years, so we put together a table read just to hear it read. And Gene Hackman read the part that he eventually played, Harry Zim. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, you were just fantastic. He said, I don't know what the F you're talking about. I said, you were just so great. You're so funny. He said, I'm not a comedian. And I said, that's what makes you funny. And the truth is, you never want anyone to act funny in your comedies. You want the scene to be funny, the situation to be funny, the character to be funny, but you don't want an actor to act funny. You just want them to play the scene, and if the scene is funny, they'll be funny. But anytime an actor tries to be funny, here's Tommy Lee Jones' first day of shooting on Men in Black. It wasn't with Will. Will was finishing up Independence Day. Tommy is talking to an alien in the Sonora Desert that has arms and flippers and is speaking in an alien tongue. And Tommy's line, first day of shooting, Tommy's line to the alien is, and this isn't in the book, Tommy's first line is, that's enough, Mikey, put up your hands and all your flippers. Cut. Tommy, you know what? It's going to be funnier if you don't acknowledge that put up your flippers is funny. See, for you, this is another day of work for you. It's not funny. Let the audience think that's funny. Don't you be funny. And he looked at me, and it was the first day of shooting, and the look was, I hate you, Sonnenfeld, and I'm going to hate you for 20 weeks. And he did. But I never let him be funny, and that's why he's so funny in the show.
It's fantastic. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but if you have any last comments or thoughts for the audience regarding your book or anything, please take the time now. This has been a true pleasure.
Well, thanks. Eddie, I really enjoyed our time together. I love this book festival. We didn't get into, of course, my bar mitzvah, which was in a church. But that's another story for another time. That's in the book. I hope people will want to read the book because I'm very proud of it. It's funny, it's entertaining, it's informative. You learn a lot about making films and my theories about lenses and moving camera and all that. But there are also lots of stories just about my mother's cooking and how not to fry a hard-boiled egg, which can only lead to having to repaint the ceiling. I enjoyed the experience, and people that read it seem to like it. So there's that.
There are many wonderful quotes from your mother, including that why buy fresh vegetables if you can get it in a can?
That's right.
Which is
not even frozen.
Yes, in a can.
In a can.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule, the Detroit Jewish Book Fair. This has been wonderful. We hope everyone enjoyed.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Barry and Eddie, for being with us tonight and for such a stimulating and amusing conversation. And thanks to all of you at home for joining us. Our next event is Michigan Haunts, Public Places, Eerie Spaces at 9:30 tomorrow morning, followed by Food Day, featuring 3 separate cookbook events. So remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can buy Barry's book and see our full schedule, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. Stay safe and have a great night.